humanity's deepest question throughout history. Since the first sparks of consciousness on Earth, humanity has been chasing a single question: who am I? This is not merely a personal curiosity. It is the foundation of myths, religions, philosophy, and science. To know oneself is to begin to know the world. We examine the concept of the self through the lenses of science, mythology, and philosophy. Is there truly a self? Or is identity nothing more than an illusion created by our brain? Are the gods of myths actually symbolic representations of our inner selves? Or is everything merely the experience of a thinking mind? The scientific approach, the self through the eyes of neuroscience. What exactly is this thing we call I? To trace the essence at the center of our being, scientists turned to the brain, because the home of the mind is the brain, and within it lies a system of consciousness evolved over millions of years. According to neuroscience, the self is a synthesis of complex brain signals, memories, sensations, and thoughts. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision-making, planning, and self-awareness. The default mode network activates when we think about ourselves. Interestingly, damage to these brain regions can shatter the sense of self. People can forget who they are, where they are, or their past entirely. This shows that the self is not a fixed, unchanging essence. It is a process produced by the brain. Like an orchestra playing music, our brain generates the feeling of being someone. As neuroscientist Anil Seth puts it, consciousness is a controlled hallucination created by the brain. So, could the way we experience ourselves also be a kind of hallucination? Science is clear on this point. The only thing that truly exists is the biological machine, our body. The I is simply a reflection of this machine. But even with this knowledge, are we truly satisfied? The mythological approach, the search for identity in creation myths. The language of science is data and observation, but humanity began seeking answers to its existence long before that, and to do so, it turned to stories. Mythology is not just about gods, giants, and heroes. It is the symbolic expression of the questions humans ask themselves. And one of the most fundamental questions has always been, where did we come from? Sumerian mythology. Clay and the gods in one of the world's oldest civilizations. The Sumerians believed humans were created from a mixture of clay and divine blood. The god Enki and the earth goddess, Ninhursag, breathed a divine spark into the human form, not just giving life, but also consciousness. The myth sends a clear message. Humans are made of both earth and divine light, a fusion of the material and the spiritual. Ancient Greece, know thyself. Nothi Sauton inscribed at the entrance of the Temple of Delphi. Nothi Sauton, know thyself. In Greek mythology, when Prometheus gave fire to humanity, it wasn't just technology. It was the spark of consciousness. This godlike gift separated humans from animals, but also introduced them to responsibility and suffering. When Pandora's box was opened, all evils spread across the world. But at the bottom of the box, hope remained. Maybe the act of asking, who am I, is a reflection of that hope. Hindu mythology, Atman and Brahman in Hindu philosophy, the individual soul, Atman, is identical with the universal soul, Brahman. So the answer to who am I is, you are the universe itself. Tat Tavam Asi, thou art that. Identity is not a boundary, but the realization of a greater whole. The self is not a drop of water, it is the ocean itself. Turkic mythology. The sky's sun and earth mother in Central Asian myths. A descending light from the sky and rising water from the earth represent the celestial and earthly origins of humanity. Humans belong to the earth, but gaze at the sky. Who am I is once again a search for origin. Where did I come from? Why am I here? These myths were written across different geographies and languages, but their message is the same. Humans are not made of just flesh and bone, but of meaning. And to find that meaning, they ask the same timeless question: who am I? The philosophical approach. Descartes, Hume, and the nature of the self-mythology speaks in symbols, science in data. Philosophy speaks through pure thought, and the question of the self is one of its oldest concerns. Descartes: I think, therefore I am. In the 17th century, René Descartes decided to doubt everything he knew. He trusted neither his senses nor the world. Everything could be an illusion. But one thing he was certain of: I think, therefore I am. To Descartes, the existence of the self is found in the act of thinking. If you are thinking, there must be a you that exists. This self is mental, distinct from the world, and unquestionably real. However, this approach defines the self as fixed and unchanging. Later, philosophers challenged this view. Hume: there is no self. According to David Hume, when we look inward, we find only perceptions, feelings, and thoughts, but no unifying self behind them. As he famously said, whenever I turn my gaze inward, I never catch myself without a perception. I always observe this or that sensation, but never a self. For Hume, the self is an illusion born of the continuity of impressions, like a river that is constantly flowing, but always called by the same name. Nietzsche: the self is a construction. For Nietzsche, the self is not a given essence, but something that is created over time. Humans are beings that craft their own identities, which means both freedom and responsibility. In his view, the question, who am I, merges with, what will I become? The self is not a destination, it is a journey. Unlike science or mythology, philosophy does not offer clear answers, but perhaps that's because the question itself resists clarity. Because who am I is not just a question of knowledge, it is a question of existence. Who am I? It is not a search for an answer, but perhaps the beginning of a lifelong journey. Neuroscience tells us the self is a process built in the brain. Mythology introduces us to symbols of meaning. Philosophy reveals the self as fluid, questionable, and transformative. And all these approaches point to the same truth. The self cannot be trapped in a single definition. It is fragmented, changeable, sometimes present, sometimes elusive. Perhaps what makes who am I so powerful is that it may never be fully answered, because we too are as dynamic, contradictory, and alive as the question itself. One day, science may change its answer. Mythologies may give birth to new symbols. Philosophy may start with a different question. But in every age, humans will continue to ask, who am I? Because the only creature that seeks to understand itself is the human being.